Welcome back. You're listening to A Path to Wellness on rhinoonair.com, WSPF-DB.com, and Dr. Christopher Jackson, PhD, DOM, Florida. And the show is named after my practice, which is A Path to Wellness, and I'm trying to help everyone on their personal paths to wellness, and it's kind of the philosophy I try to go with. And part of that is helping people understand what it is that they're eating. I mean, the food in the United States is very processed quite often. And much of the food is not what it appears to be. And so I'm kind of continuing in a series on the lies we're told about our food. And one of the phrases that catches my eye and is very subliminal and very a very hidden way of saying something is not natural when it sounds like they're saying it is natural. And that's a little cryptic, but basically, when you see the phrase made, or the two words made with, you should be highly suspicious. When it says made with, because that word with, made with, doesn't mean made of. It doesn't mean it's composed of such and such. It means it's made with. That's a part of the ingredients, not the entire ingredient. So when you see something that says made with real fruit juice, or made with real cheese, or made with no artificial colors, or made without any artificial flavors, or made with, watch out for that, because quite often something's being hidden from you. One of the old ones that I saw was made with, this is years ago I saw this one, on 100% Welch's grape juice, I think it was, but it was one of the Welch's juices. And it said 100% juice, made with real juice or something, right? Well, it also had the ingredient carmine in it. Carmine is a juice, yes, it is a juice. It's a juice I've talked about before. It's otherwise known as cochineal extract. It is a juice. It's a juice made from grinding down red beetles and getting the juice from the beetles to give it a reddish color. And that juice from crushing the red beetles, of course, the FDA approves it, as generally regarded as safe, but there are some who may have allergies to those little things. May have allergies to the bugs, for example, that may have a problem with that, or just the disgust factor, right? Even though it said 100% juice, this was a component of it. So when you see made with, be suspicious that there's something else there. There's something else being used. It may not be entirely what you think it is. And definitely what you want to do is not read the front label. You want to avoid getting trapped reading front labels. You're not reading the front label, you're reading the back label, okay? If you want to actually have some knowledge about what's in your food. If there's a label on it, quite likely it's been processed, right? If there's a label on it, look at the back label. Look at not only the nutritional ingredients, look at the list of components within the food. All right, and generally speaking, there's kind of a rule of thumb, if it has more than 8 ingredients, throw it away, don't eat it. But in point of fact, it may be something totally natural that's a mixture of several ingredients that can be natural. But quite often that list of ingredients is many different chemical substances that have been created and put into the food, quote unquote, to enhance it in some way. And that may be enhancing it with colors, flavors, taste stimulants. In other words, things like MSG, monosodium glutamate, that stimulate the taste buds, tantalize the taste buds, may make you draw toward those foods, these kinds of things. So we need to watch out for these kinds of things in the food. And there are many types of labeling that are done that skirt around the issue. Nowadays, food companies are catching on. They're catching on to the fact that the folks eating the food are becoming more aware of unnatural ingredients. And so they try to kind of skip or take a shortcut to the perception of their food being healthy by doing things like putting something on the front label that says, natural flavors, or natural colors, or not using artificial flavor, not using artificial color, or gluten-free, or these kinds of things, that are giving you the initial impression that it's healthy. But just because something is gluten-free doesn't mean it's healthy. Gluten-free pertains to if you have a food issue, a gluten issue, which many people do, especially those with autoimmune disorders or celiac, different things like that, then obviously you want to avoid the gluten. But just because something is gluten-free doesn't mean that it is healthy. And that's kind of the underlying lie you're being told, that this food is healthy just because it's gluten-free. No, that's kind of the impression or the message being portrayed. Just like the message that something has no artificial colors or has no artificial flavors. Okay, so what does it have? Well, there may be soy. There may be soy oils. There may be corn. There may be corn syrup. There may be, many forms of corn or soy, or genetically modified ingredients like wheat may be genetically modified. All of these kinds of ingredients may be involved in the foods. And there is science in both directions. Some of it's contrary to other science that says, genetic modification, in some cases they've shown results where it led to cancer. In other cases it showed no problem. However, we need to look more closely at why some showed cancer, why some inflamed the body, and why some didn't under the testing conditions. And how valid were those tests, and who were they done by? And was there a vested interest in the results of the test? These kinds of questions to really understand what's really going on. Okay, so when something does have artificial ingredients, though, we already know there's some issues there. And there are many issues with relation to children having sensitivities, ADHD, ADD, things like that may be involved because of sensitivities to artificial colors and artificial flavors. But there are deeper issues. There are many deeper issues. So I'm going to read to you a little study done by the American Chemical Society. So it says, a new study raises concern about chronic exposure of workers in industry to a food flavoring ingredient. Okay, I won't tell you just yet what ingredient that is, but a food flavoring ingredient that definitely tantalizes, and it's used in many snack foods. And by the way, that includes margarine, which used to be the manna from heaven because it didn't have saturated fat. Well, actually, that makes it worse if you're cooking with it. Far worse, because it then creates trans fat. But some of the effects of it, I'll tell you what the chemical ingredient is. It's diacetyl. Diacetyl is synthetic, and one of the results of diacetyl is that it intensifies the damaging effects of an abnormal brain protein linked to Alzheimer's disease. Okay? So diacetyl. So chronic exposure of diacetyl, or to diacetyl, has produced some serious results in the health of individuals who worked in the environment of its production, this kind of thing. Okay. And I'm going to pop over to another part here. So there is this will let the cat out of the bag, but there is a result of the chronic exposure, health-wise, that comes from being exposed to that specific substance, diacetyl. And let me see. It has been known as popcorn lung. Popcorn lung, because workers who worked in the environment where this substance was being manufactured, and still do, have a result that is not too great. They get scarring of the lungs, and it's a condition, again, known as popcorn lung. So I just let the cat out of the bag. So popcorn lung can result, the scarring of the lungs results from exposure to diacetyl, which is an artificially created chemical that has been used for creation of the flavoring used to simulate butter in microwave popcorn. So diacetyl is a big problem. And again, so we have popcorn lung itself through exposure in the manufacturing process. And then we have also a link in a study from the American Chemical Society showing that it's also linked to worsening and development of Alzheimer's. Partly because it easily crosses the blood-brain barrier, goes across the blood-brain barrier, and causes damage to the proteins in the brain that then trigger this disorder. And it has to do with amyloid buildup in the brain. So that's a pretty serious issue, and that is in your quote-unquote buttered popcorn, microwavable popcorn, that you'll see that. And it's pretty damaging. And guess what? Back on the situation with walking into a school with little kids and seeing, like I mentioned in the last show, them distributing goldfish, which are full of things that we don't really want in our food, especially for the kids. I've also seen popcorn being a snack food for the little kids. So we've got these little little ones being exposed to these toxic chemicals in the food. I think this is a serious issue in this country, that we're not really looking closely enough at the food that we are feeding not only adults, but children. Okay. Now, diacetyl is not only used in the microwave popcorn, it's used in margarines, as I mentioned, snack foods of various kinds, candy. I'm not a big fan of candy. I know that a lot of people think that being a child is all about eating candy, but here's another example of something toxic in the candy, in baked goods, also in pet foods even. So if your little one is an animal, like is not a human being, there's still issues there. So, you know, I'm not saying you're going to give your cat Alzheimer's, because it probably will take longer than the cat's going to be alive anyway. But with our children, giving this kind of thing early on may lend to the development of the amyloid deposits in the brain that lead to eventually Alzheimer's. Okay, that's just one component of microwavable popcorn. Okay, and it's pretty serious in and of itself. Okay, so we don't want to keep contributing to this beta amyloid clumping that occurs in our brains, right? In the brains of people who end up with Alzheimer's. So this is one way to avoid that, is to avoid microwave popcorn, believe it or not. So there are other ingredients in the microwave popcorn. Let's get into those. So one of these is one of my pet peeves, and it's horrible that we're doing this to our kids. I've seen it in lots of snack foods. In fact, one of them I mentioned last week, which was, again, goldfish. And it is tertiary butyl hydroquinone, TBHQ. Now you heard the butyl part of that, okay? So it's a chemical preservative that's used, yes, in microwave popcorn and many other snack foods. And it's a form of butane, lighter fluid. Okay, that's another component of your microwavable popcorn. Now, TBHQ I've talked about before, and last week I mentioned it as a component of the goldfish. TBHQ is a carcinogen. It has been shown in animal studies that it increases the risk of various forms of cancer and mutation, and can lend to other issues that are both behavioral issues like ADD and other issues that show the toxic nature of it, because our skin reflects the toxicity we have inside. And our skin will show us when our skin is erupting, when our skin is showing us, you know, all sorts of these disorders that dermatologists label, you know, either eczema, dermatitis, psoriasis, all these things. They reflect something going on inside. And that's another way that the TBHQ shows up, is in skin disorders. All right, so we've got to watch out for TBHQ, also known as preservative E319. If you see codes like that, just, you know, I'll skip this, you know, move on. You don't need to be eating that. Okay. So we have the microwavable popcorn is a big one, and it has several chemicals in it. The other one that I'm going to mention is perfluorooctanoic acid. So perfluorooctanoic acid, PFOA, is another one, and there are problems associated with that. It can lead to cardiovascular issues, to thyroid issues, and nausea and other things that go along with it. And so if you're feeling some nausea, if you're inhaling that popcorn odor that comes with microwave popcorn, that may be why. All right, so PFOA is also something that you may have heard of in respect to Teflon, and we want to avoid that as well. So we have other issues related to it. Certainly, it's toxic in several ways. You have these artificially bastardized, basically, oils that are in your microwave popcorn. Okay, so we have that issue. So as you can see, these things are studied. They are being revealed in studies to be a problem, and we need to be avoiding them. Now, Pepperidge Farm is interesting. They're the ones that put out the goldfish, and they make an argument that genetic modification is fine. It's okay. You don't need to worry about it. We'll just keep doing it, and you don't have to worry. You can trust us. Okay? Or they say you can trust the FDA, because the FDA has reviewed it and said, oh, they're generally regarded as safe, despite studies that show to the contrary. Just leave it at that for the moment. Okay, so when you look at a bag of their colored goldfish, they'll tell you all the ingredients, like, the polyunsaturated fat is 1 gram and monounsaturated 3 grams, and they've got 2% of the vitamin A daily requirement, and 10% of the thiamine, and 10% of the riboflavin. If you're just looking at the nutrient ingredients, then you're going to think that it's likely fairly healthy, except for the fact that maybe it has 240 milligrams of sodium per serving, which is 55 little pieces. So it has some iron in it, 6%, and calcium 2%. This is good nutritional information, right? But it's not all of the information, because when you look at the actual list of ingredients, you'll also see things like soy oil, genetically modified, the grains that are used, genetically modified. Even though it's touting itself as healthier or healthy, because they're not using any artificial colors or artificial flavors. And this is kind of the route that some restaurants are going. I mentioned Panera Bread last time. I've had some conversation with some people within Panera Bread, and this was before they decided, oh yeah, we're going to make some changes and we're going to take the artificial colors out and artificial flavors and so on. And they've done much of that, but there are still components of the food that are questionable, and genetic modification is a part of that. So we want to be aware of that. And many of these also, even if it's not about the genetic modification, what if you're somebody who is allergic to soy? There are many people who are allergic to soy. Many are allergic to gluten also, of course, and some are even allergic to dairy. So you need to be aware of what's in your food. And what I suggest is when you go out to eat, that at least ask for an allergen menu if you have any issues whatsoever. But I like to ask more questions, deeper questions, to find out what I'm really eating if I'm eating out. Okay, so there's something that I think about sometimes, especially when I see articles on television that talk about what was it, a Guinness Book of Records or a big accomplishment. This little girl sells more Girl Scout cookies than anybody else. And I thought, what a disservice. Pretty negative, huh? But the truth is, the ingredients of Girl Scout cookies are not so hot. You know, many of them contain hydrogenated oils. You know, they say they have zero trans fat, but frankly, I wonder about that. Most of them have lots of sugar in them. And I wonder also about genetic modification. Some of them have soy oils in them. So these kinds of things are not good. And we like to buy our Girl Scout cookies because it's kind of an all-American kind of thing to do, right? Buy your Girl Scout cookies. So we have lots of ingredients there that we need to watch out for, take a look at, and not be consuming, especially in high volume, those ingredients. But the lie there is that it's wholesome and good for you because, after all, it's Girl Scouts, Girl Scout cookies, right? So it must be good. It must be good for you. It's like it's almost like all American, right? Like apple pie. Have you looked at apple pie? Have you looked at the ingredients of apple pie? When you go out and you shop at your neighborhood grocery store, do you look at what's in the ingredients of the baked goods that you pick up? You know, one of the ingredients that I see commonly in apple pie is not so hot. We have actually several ingredients, but one of them that is not so hot is corn syrup. Corn syrup has this way of kind of fooling your liver into thinking that it's, you know, it doesn't need to be processed the same way, that it's not processed like regular sugar. And it contributes to the development of a condition known as fatty liver. That's one example. You will see lots of things like soy oil, other ingredients that may be genetically modified in your apple pie. Whatever happened to just apples, cinnamon, sugar, you know, maybe some flour, and, you know, why can't we just do that? Why do we have to add all these strange and problematic ingredients to simple baking? When we look at other baked goods that are supposed to be wholesome and good for you, you know, after all, I mean, they're made with whole wheat or something like that. What are they really made of? Well, okay. So first of all, the wheat may be genetically modified, but what else may be in there? Well, okay, so they may be cooked with flours that may have other substances in them, like bromates and bromides, which I talk about a lot, that run down thyroid function. Also fluorides from the water, chlorine from the water. Yeah. So these are what we consider wholesome foods, or at least a lot of people consider them wholesome foods. But are they really wholesome? Not if they have those things in them. So, you know, we have the impressions from the marketing that's done, from the advertising that's done on television and all of these different forms of media. Maybe, you know, attracting you to certain foods, but these foods are quite often not very good. So, you know, we know some of the big perpetrators of these things, like McDonald's and Burger King and all the fast food joints that give you all your, you know, fried, trans fat filled fries and you know, burgers that are essentially glued together, bastardized meats, just so many different things that are in the so-called food that cause trouble in our bodies, are inflammatory, and lead to disease. And, you know, again, here we have at least the lie that, you know, McDonald's is all American wholesome food. At one point, that was the way we understood it. You know, that it was just fast food. They just figured out a way to make it faster. That's all, right? Fast food, just faster, so we could drive through, no big deal, pick it up. We had food. Problem is, no longer is it really food. It's not really the original food that we would think. It is converted, blended, restructured, chemically altered, with additives, preservatives, glues, emulsifiers, all these different things to make it the same every time. So part of the impetus is to make it uniform so that you always get what you expect, right? So you'll buy more because you know what to expect, so you'll keep getting it. But unfortunately, we have a lot of ingredients in there that are not wholesome, not healthy for us. And this goes to other foods, right? So I'm going to go back to another lie that I probably mentioned last time, but I'm going to bring it up again. And that is diet drinks. Diet drinks. So diet drinks have artificial sweeteners in them. The artificial sweeteners, generally speaking, increase insulin resistance. What that means is that your body doesn't respond as well to the artificial sugars, in the sense that the insulin response is lagging. It takes longer for your body to respond to the sugars and take care of them. And we build up what's called insulin resistance. Well, insulin resistance is one of the factors involved in diabetes. So what we're doing when we use these artificial sweeteners is we are contributing to the development of one of the epidemic disorders of our time, which is diabetes. And so what we see is that these folks who are looking at these boxes and seeing, okay, there's very low carb or very low sugar contents, grabbing them and thinking they're doing something good. But what they're really doing is contributing to their disorder, if diabetes is the issue, by picking up these foods. So this is another lie that we're told, that diet is good for you. Diet is not good for you. If it says diet on the label, you probably want to put it back, because it's going to make things worse for you. Okay. So one of these lies, if you want to call it, perpetuated by the food industry early on, was the idea that low fat is good for you. Well, low fat, I mean, there are some facets of low fat as far as food goes that can be helpful in certain situations. But for the most part, when they say low fat, what they're not saying is high carb. They're not saying they've added a ton of sugar so that the flavor won't be so objectionable because they've taken out the fat. So this comes from the idea that cholesterol is a big issue, that cholesterol is a disorder in and of itself, high cholesterol or hypercholesterolemia. Hypercholesterolemia is not a disorder itself. It's a symptom of something else. So treating the high cholesterol with drugs to lower the cholesterol is not getting to the point. It's not getting to the source. One of the sources of that, certainly, is high sugar, high carb. Going through absorbing those sugars causes oxidative responses in the body, in the vessels, in the blood vessels, etc., that are damaging to your blood vessels. So you get damage on the inner surfaces of your blood vessels. And it's actually a saving grace that you have this LDL being produced by your liver, low density lipoprotein, to patch up and repair the inner walls of your blood vessels so that, so that they don't become worse. Now, yes, eventually what happens over time is you do build up some plaque if this is a continuous habit that you have eating these high sugar diets. So this is the body's way of compensating for that. So the cause of it is not consuming high cholesterol diet. The cause of it is more rooted in consuming a high carb diet or high sugar diet and the damage done there. Well, there's also damage done if you're producing a lot of insulin, which is what happens when you are consuming foods that have artificial sweeteners, because you're increasing your insulin resistance, therefore your body produces more insulin to accomplish the same objective, to absorb the sugars. And insulin causes a reduction, something I state once in a while, in the a reduction in the oxygen transfer between your bloodstream and your muscles. So what happens is that you're essentially, in a sense, asphyxiating your body, you're reducing your energy, and you're damaging your body. So it has a very aging effect. So that's another way that the damage occurs from these so-called foods. You see, so diet sounds healthy. I see people buying jugs or cases of these diet sodas. I just, I don't say anything usually because I just, it's hard to communicate to people about their own health and their choices just inadvertently. You can't just walk up to somebody and say, here's a $2,000, take this and go buy yourself something. They're going to look at you and like, are you kidding me? You're full of it, right? And it's the same response with giving somebody information that could be helpful to them out of the blue when they are unfamiliar with it and it's unusual, and they're just going to think you're crazy, or there's something going on there that they don't get it, and that can't be real, basically. So unfortunately, they either have to seek out the help, usually, or happen to come across a path to wellness, or the show, or somehow come across that information, right? Happen to pick up the right magazine. I've been writing in Tampa Bay Wellness magazine, and that's one of them that you may find some good help as far as some ideas. But to get down to the nitty-gritty of what's going on with your own individual health condition, it takes a little more than that. And it can be a very deep subject and take a lot of delving into. So basically the food industry is conveying all of these messages, quite often subliminally, about the healthiness of certain foods by saying, now the messages lately is what's not in your food, right? But what they're not saying is what is in your food quite often. And what is in your food may be very unhealthy. So it's a way of marketing, obviously, to people who think they're doing the right thing and eating the right food, making the right choice, because they only read the front label. And the front label looks like, hey, this is healthy, right? Because it has no artificial colors, or it has no artificial flavors, or it's gluten-free, or all of these kinds of things. The only ones that I buy, I mean, yes, I buy gluten-free. Certainly gluten-free can be good, but you've got to look at more than just, is it gluten-free or not? Because that's no guarantee. It's not full of artificial colorings, flavorings, synthetic chemicals of various kinds, genetically modified grains, etc. So there's a lot of possibilities in there, MSG, etc., or even artificial sweeteners. So you can have all of those things in a food that's gluten-free. So if you're just jumping on that because it says gluten-free, you may be missing some important information about the food. So we have to really watch out, because they're pulling it. They're really scamming us. They're trying to market their way through awareness of people who really look at the food and want to eat healthy. So there are layers. This is kind of a concept I've been thinking about a lot. There are layers of understanding of health, and there are layers of understanding of what is healthy food. And some people think, whole grain, milk is good for the bones, beef is good because of the protein for you, so it must be good. This kind of thing. That's there's not much real about those statements. Then some people get to the level of understanding that maybe some of the artificial ingredients are not so healthy for them. Some people, another aspect of it is pesticides, right? So I think there is probably a small percentage of the population that really believes that pesticides are good for you because, hey, they keep the bugs off the food, right? The fact that they're neurotoxins, xenoestrogens, that they chemically alter your body, you absorb those substances, and it can lead to various forms of cancer and other hormonal disorders and all sorts of things. They may not be aware of that, okay? So we have levels of understanding of all of this. So organic kind of helps to get rid of all of the pesticide issue, right? Organic foods generally have no pesticides or have minimal pesticides because it's very difficult to be purely organic in a country that farms so much with pesticides, because your neighbor farm might be full of pesticides when your farm might not. So there's all of this, invasion of other sources in the farming process. So it's difficult to be purely organic, but it's the best we're going to do in this situation. So organic is a good choice because you can avoid the pesticides, okay? Well, another part of that is that organic generally means non-GMO, not genetically modified. So those are two things you want to look out for: non-GMO and organic. And they can help skirt around a lot of the issues, because organic foods are not going to have the artificial flavors, artificial colors, the genetic modification, all of these kinds of things. So for the most part, in other words, there may be a tiny element of those substances even in organic food, a very small percentage. So of course, we're trying to avoid those as much as possible. Organic is the way to go. But on those levels again, so we have this understanding. Okay, somebody's gonna. Some people buy the food pyramid. Okay, you buy the food pyramid. So we want lots of grain. You know, we want to be filling up on grain fibers. We want to eat lots of beef and lots of dairy, of course. So these are big industries, right? Grain, beef, and dairy industries. So, but that has nothing to do with why that food pyramid is the way it is, right? So just another lie. Yeah. So when we eat healthy, okay, some of us say, okay, we're going to eat a plant-based diet. Okay, but if you're ignoring the use of pesticides and you're eating a plant-based diet that comes from the factory farming, guess what? You're getting the pesticides. And those pesticides are going into your cells, going throughout your body, latching on to fatty cells especially, the xenoestrogens. They're affecting many, maybe at a small level, but as they accumulate more and more, the functions within your body. So you see, a lot of these substances are either hidden from us, or they try to do a marketing Hail Mary pass. Basically they try to find a marketing way of getting around the issue by making you think it's healthy because it's gluten-free, or it's no artificial flavors or no artificial colors. And quite often, by the way, it's only one of those, so it'll be no artificial flavors. Chances are they have artificial colors, or no artificial colors. Chances are they have artificial flavors. So what they're saying is what is healthy. What they're not saying is what's not healthy about the food. And by doing that, the first impression is that first thing you read on the label that says, we're healthy. That's the subliminal message, right? But guess what? Quite often, they're not. They have a lot of these other substances in them. So choosing is not a matter of choosing, again, let me repeat myself, choosing good foods is not a matter of choosing what's on the front label. It's a matter of looking more deeply at what is in the list of ingredients and filtering out those ingredients that can be problematic. Okay? Artificial colors, artificial flavors, artificial preservatives, TBHQ, diacetyl, etc. We want to avoid foods that have these substances in them, generally speaking, as a general rule, to make healthier choices. So we look deeper, not just at what's on the front label, because that front label is lying to you. That front label is for marketing purposes. They want to sell you more. So they're going to make you think it's healthy with whatever they can say about the food that sounds healthy. But when you look closer, you'll see there's a lot more in there that's not so healthy. Check it out. Start looking. All right. So thanks for listening. You've been listening to A Path to Wellness on rhinoonair.com, WSPF-DB.com. And I'm Dr. Christopher Jackson, PhD, DON, Florida. And the show is A Path to Wellness. The practice is A Path to Wellness. And the website is aptw.net. So you can also give us a call at 727-329-9637 if you'd like.
And Doug, before you go, where can they pick up this wellness magazine? Or
The Tampa Bay Wellness Magazine is in a lot of the healthier establishments. Like you'll see them at smoothie places. You'll see them at Evo's, which is a sort of a healthy fast food place. You'll see them at many places around town, Rolling Oats, health food stores, etc.
And there's a really good article this week about energy levels, or this month.
This month, it's the one for March, and then there's another one coming out in April that I've just written.
And free shout out here to Wellness Tampa Bay Magazine.
Tampa Bay Wellness Magazine. Yeah.
Because Dr. Christopher Jackson is in it.
I've written quite a few articles in the magazine.
So, okay. Sorry to interrupt.
No worries.
And again, any idea of what you'll be talking about next week?
I'm still working on it.
Okay.
That's what, yeah. So, enjoyed discussing these things again and a little further maybe. And hope you enjoyed it, and we'll talk to you next time.